Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cosmos Society Online Open House Series. I am Keith Stone, your host, and we are honored to welcome today Gloria Pinney, who is, and I will give the little introduction here right now, Professor Emerita of Classical Archaeology and Art at Harvard University, a current senior fellow at the Center for Hellenic Studies. Her recent interests concern the interpretation of images, the construction of genders, and the intersection of text and monuments. Her 2003 monograph, Figures of Speech, Men and Maidens in Ancient Greece, was awarded the 2004 Wiseman Book Award by the Archaeological Institute of America. Her current research deals with visual and literary representations of geography and with the issue of continuities from the Aegean Bronze Age into the Iron Age. It is in connection with this last item that we welcome her today to talk with us about the Legacy of Minos. Gloria, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Before I let you begin your presentation, I will pester you with the question that I ask all of our guests, and that is, if you could tell us about the genesis of your interest in things classical and archaeology. Was there a moment even, or what can you tell us?
Well, it started quite early, and I was keenly interested in classics from the time I was in high school. I had very good teachers, and I was interested in archaeology also as, in a sense, a historical source. Mm-hmm. And as I said before, I grew up in Rome, so there was plenty to look up and think about. And so I was quite committed, if I remember it right, by the time I was 16. Mm-hmm. Wow. I hadn't thought about it before.
Yeah, thank you. All right, please go ahead and just call for the images that you've prepared whenever you're ready.
Okay, so what I would like to do is to begin by, I will talk about Minos, but I would like to explain what my particular point of view is on the stories that concern Minos, which is somewhat idiosyncratic. And so forces a particular perspective on the problem of this myth. As you heard, I'm an archaeologist. I'm not a person who studies religion or literature, even though I poach freely whenever I feel like it in those fields. So if I can begin with the first slide, my point of departure, here it is. This is a detail of a very long fresco from a house in Akrotiri on Thera that was buried in the explosion of the volcano on Thera around, to follow the high chronology, 1625 BC. It is a landscape, a complex landscape that has ships, a ship procession. It's a voyage. And in this frieze, I identified, and I still believe that I'm right, a legend that we do know, a legendary ritual that we do know in historical times. Leaving that aside, the problem that this opened, and I should have been wiser and not looked any more into it, is just how did a specific legend make its way from the Middle Bronze Age down into the Iron Age. So let me begin by trying to frame, second slide please, by trying to frame the issue that I want to look at. The frieze in which I'm interested in which I try to identify a specific legend fits into a particular period, a particular geographic location in the on Crete and in the islands of the southern Aegean. The area, by and large, you don't see Crete. I don't see Crete in the map, but you maybe see, perhaps you see it. It's below.
Mm-hmm. It's there at the bottom.
It's below here. Now, no, I don't need that. Okay, can we go back to the map? Thank you. So the Akrotiri is on Thera right here, and this is part of a profound cultural change in this area that occurs between over about 3 centuries or more, between 1700 and 1470 BC. It is a time at which this area of the Aegean, the islands and the coast of Asia Minor, that includes the region that we geographically properly call Ionia and down to Rhodes, becomes heavily Cretan culturally. This phenomenon, which has been identified archaeologically, is called Minoanization. And there is no doubt as to its characteristics. That is, gradually the Cyclades, and particularly important to the definition of this phenomenon are, of course, Thera, Milos, and off the coast of Attica, the island of Chaos, which is the home of sources that we have read, namely Bacchylides, and also of an important excavation by Cincinnati in the 60s and the 70s. But really, it is a phenomenon that concerns this entire area, which later on in historical times we know as Ionia. The centers that would celebrate the festival of Apollo and Delos, described in the Homeric hymn to Delian Apollo, and also by Thucydides, that included the Athenians and the islanders. Now, at this point, gradually the islanders come to adopt Cretan ways in architecture, in frescoes such as the one that I am interested in, and also what seems to affect the way of life most profoundly, the introduction of new techniques, such as the potter's wheel, the vertical loom, the employment of linear script, or Cretan script, linear A, the adoption of a Cretan system of weights and measures. So there is no doubt as to what this is. It is a phenomenon that was called early on, when it was recognized by Evans, Minoanization. Now I can do without the slides. We can go back, we can go to the text. Good.
Okay.
Because it was connected immediately to passages in Thucydides and also Herodotus that speak about the dominion of the Aegean Sea on the part of Minos. Thucydides tells us that Minos was the first. He was the first to have a navy. He becomes the overlord of the Cyclades, and he colonizes them, driving out the Carians. This is the first passage on the handout. And cleaning, a sort of catharsis, cleaning the pirates off the sea. Caserei, ectes thalassis. So the second passage of Thucydides also repeats many of the same salient so-called facts. Minos forms a navy, expels the malefactors, and establishes a dominion of Crete over the islands. What I want to draw attention to the fact that this establishment of Minos's power is characterized by, first of all, by a tabula rasa. There is the expulsion of the Carians. And the Carians are then, there is a new population that is established in the Cyclades. And his own sons become the governors. Now, by and large, Aegean archaeologists have jettisoned the story about Minos. as something that really has nothing to do with the clearly established archaeological reality of a cultural dominance or cultural hegemony of Crete over the islands. This would be, I'm so sorry. I should have warned everybody that I have a little cough. Would be irrelevant. It's simply a made-up story that contributes nothing to our understanding of what is a historical, archaeologically documented phenomenon. And that is as it should be, because we don't do that anymore. We don't look at myths trying to find the historical kernel that was transmitted in sort of a natural functioning memory through the centuries. We now understand that memory works in different ways. All the same, I find it really an extraordinary coincidence that you have a story about a thalassocracy, Cretan thalassocracy, which is headed by Minos, and at the same time you have a historical reality of some kind of dominance of Crete over the islands over more than 3 centuries. So yes, we can toss out Minos when it comes to Minoanization, but is that a good idea? So, because in the end, since I started with that fresco, what I'm really interested in is understanding the mechanism by which features of the Bronze Age were transmitted to the Iron Age. If it's not a matter of continuities, which is a nice term but doesn't tell you anything, what kinds of situations, what kind of circumstances make for the retention of certain historical facts and the abandonment of others? So what I adopted the perspective that what we may be faced with in the stories about Minos is an invention of tradition, to use a phrase that is current. But I really prefer, and I want to quote Greg Nash's, who's, I'm sure you're all familiar with Greg, yes? Formulation of this, which is very helpful. He's talking about the life of Hesiod and the traditions about the life of Hesiod. And he says, the real historical facts are the stories themselves, which are artifacts that have their own historical reality. So the point of reference for these stories is the real world in which they were elaborated and told, and not the artificial world that they narrate. In other words, what I would suggest is that in looking at the Minoanization of the Cyclades and of the Aegean, and in the legends about Minos, we're looking at 2 sets of historical facts. One located in the Middle and early Late Bronze Age, the other one located at some other point in time, which I would like to suggest later on, and for some other reason. That is, without the mission of the myth is not to tell about the Minoan Empire over the Cyclades, necessarily, although it involves that too. So with that said, how much time have I taken up with this point? I turn to Minos. And I want to turn to the 4th passage on the handout, which is Bacchylides' Ode 1. Bacchylides is a poet from Chaos, which by coincidence, I assume, and this island, this Ionian island off the coast of Attica, ends up being one of our main sources about about Minos. And this ode, this victory ode, tells of the coming of Minos to Chaos. The beginning is fragmentary, so it's largely lost, but we know the story from Achaean historian Xenomedes, which is summarized in Callimachus' idea. So it's a long story, but we know that the scene opens on a landscape of destruction. Zeus and Poseidon have destroyed the island and its population because the Telchines who inhabited the island had misbehaved. And that provoked the ire of Zeus and Poseidon. Only 3 women survive, Lysagora, Machello, and Exithea. And then on the 3rd day after destruction comes Minos with ships and warriors. And he takes the lovely girl Exithea, and then he leaves her, leaving on the island half of his people that had come in the 50 ships with him. And after 9 months, dutifully, Exithea produces an heir, Euxanthius. The matter of Euxanthius is taken up by Pindar in the next passage, Paean 4. And Pindar praises Euxanthius because Euxanthius refuses to go to Crete to take up his share of the legacy of Minos and rule part of the island, together with the sons of Minos and Pasiphae. Some elements of Thucydides' narration are picked up in Bacchylides Ode 1, namely a total destruction of the landscape, but also of the population, which is then replaced with a new population of descendants from Minos and his men. And the second point is that it has to do with the inheritance of Minos, which is, of course, Euxanthius is entitled. If we go back on the handout to Bacchylides Ode 17, probably a dithyramb, now in Thucydides as well as in Bacchylides Ode 1 and in Pindar 4, we meet a Minos who is essentially a force for good. With the coming of Minos' empire, there is peace. The sea is cleared of pirates. There is increased prosperity on the islands. And all is a force for good. But with Bacchylides Ode 17, we meet the Minos, the boogeyman, because this is part of the legend of the Cretan deed of Theseus, where he goes to Crete and kills the Minotaur and puts an end to the tribute that Minos was exacting from the Athenians every 9 years in vengeance for the death of his son Androgeus. And the thing is, this is the voyage of Theseus with the 7 boys and 7 girls on the ship with Minos going towards Crete. The first thing I want to note, you've read through it, right? First thing that I want to note is that Bacchylides refers to the youths on line 4 as Ionian youths. But then, later on line 93, 94, these are Athenian youths. And this is quite interesting, given the very ambivalent position that Athens has with regard to Ionian identity and its relationship to Ionians. Then, We meet here a Minos who is not the strong warrior and the wise king, but an incontinent tyrant. He cannot resist the lust that drives him to accost one of the girls, Eriboia. She cries out to Theseus, who comes to the rescue, and tells Minos to stop, and characterizes Minos' action as via violence and hubris. So, as the story goes, Minos calls on his father Zeus to send a thunderbolt to confirm his identity as the son of Zeus, and Theseus challenges him as the son of Poseidon. So Minos throws the ring into the sea, challenging Theseus to recover it, which Theseus does, re-emerging from the depths of the sea after having met Amphitrite. So as many have noticed, including Greg, this poem is about many things, but also about legacy, about inheritance. While if being son of Zeus entitles Minos to his empire, being son of Poseidon entitles Theseus to the mastery of the sea, which will come to him, will come to the Athenians, and there are intimations of what is to come. The lines 27, 28, the destiny, we shall each fulfill our destiny when the time comes. So there is a prophecy for the future. Now, so there is this theme of inheritance and legacy from Minos runs through the text that we've looked at so far. Now, I want to point out that these aspects of Minos, that is the generous, benevolent conqueror, the founder of cities, on the one hand, and the violent, hubristic tyrant, are often considered opposites, opposite facets of the character of the man. But what I want to point out, or something that has been pretty much largely ignored, is that in fact Minos is a culture hero. Bredlich notes this in his wonderful book on the Greek heroes, that is a first man, one of those who introduce new techniques and new ways of doing things to humanities, much as Prometheus might be. And what Minos brings to humanity is no less than the state, politeia, in the form of laws and in the form of territory. And so I've put in the handout some passages that concern this Minos, the lawgiver. The lawgiver in the Minos is the founder of laws, because together with Rhadamanthus, they're the sons of Zeus and Europa, and they established the laws. And in Plato's laws, which the dialogue, of course, opens as the protagonists are moving from Knossos to the Idaean cave, where Minos received the laws from Zeus. There is an allusion even to a line in the Odyssey that Minos used to go down every 9th year to hold converse with his father Zeus, and was guided by the divine oracles in laying down the laws for your cities. And the allusion is to Odyssey 19, 178-79. Minos was king for 9 years periods and conversed with great Zeus. And in fact, the foundation of the laws for the state and territorial conquest are part of the same paradigm. And this comes out in the passage of Aristotle with which I followed. System of law, the laws in the same, these are the code of laws that Minos first enacted, and the position of Crete is such that Minos was able to found his empire. And also, I cite a passage of the laws in which Plinius explains that, in fact, Minos ordered all legal usages with an eye to war, because laws are linked to territorial dominion and conquest. So Minos, the legislator, and Minos, the thalassocrat, the ruler of the sea, are, again, one and the same. What I wanted to do by pointing out that Minos is really a culture hero is that the bad Minos and the good Minos are really one and the same. That is, the persona, as you know, if you, as followers of Greg's course on the hero, you know that heroes are persons who have extraordinary capabilities, but they're not nice people. That is, it is part of the personality of the hero, the capacity for excess and for transgression, the inability to control his impulses, as happens to Minos with regard to the girl Euryboia. And Minos is, of course, a man of the age of bronze. So that, in fact, the bad Minos is part of the total persona of the king. The two parts are completely integrated. This is already noticeable in the Odyssey, in the Requia, in Odyssey 11, where Minos is called the glorious son of Zeus, who issues judgments among the dead. He is at the gate of Hades. But also, before, Odysseus has seen Phaedra and Procris and the beautiful Ariadne, the daughter of Minos, who here is said to be dark-minded, malignant, bent on revenge, Holophron. So these two are the fact, recognizing that Minos is a cultural hero is important because it imparts coherence to his character, and also I think one can point out that is in some respects quite parallel to Heracles, also a son of Zeus, also a hero particularly tied to an ethnos, which is the Dorian, but also a Pan-Hellenic hero, because he's the hero of the Gigantomachy. And also a hero who could determine the victory of the gods in the Gigantomachy, but he would also be the one to kidnap your daughter and burn your city down, which is what in the end determined his fate. So they're two heroic characters which I think have considerable similarities. All right, so where am I going with this? I would say that certainly the legends about Minos, I have not collected them all here, but the most important ones, are not going to help us understand the phenomenon of mineralization in the Cyclades in the Middle and Late Bronze Age. But they have a certain coherence that make them an excellent candidate as a foundation legend for the constitution, for the creation of a tradition that addresses the identity of the Ionian ethnos. That is what I would like to suggest, and that's what I'm going out on a limb, but that's why I'm here, is that in fact the stories about Minos create a scenario of ethnogenesis that relies on the elimination of the other. We have a new population, which is tied to Crete and specifically to Minos. And as all accounts of ethnogenesis, it relies on the establishment of a connection, of a blood connection, of a connection by syngeneia. That is the creation of a common ancestor, Minos and his Cretans, for the Ionians. And it locates the genesis of the ethnos at the beginning of time, a point of origin of the state and the laws. Minos being a first man, the first to have a navy and the first to establish laws and establish an empire. That is to say, what I'm driving at, and this is, of course, an hypothesis, is the identification of what has been called the inventional tradition, but for which Hans-Joachim Gerke has given a more specific formulation as regards antiquity, Greek antiquity in particular, which is intentional history. That is a projection in time, and I'm quoting, of elements which construct the identity of a group as a group, and which in Greek tradition results in that unknowing category, which is myth history, since no firm line was drawn between myth and history. That is a process that in which the final product is in fact an amalgamation of myth and history. That is, Gerke, for instance, traces the development of the myth of Marathon in Athenian thought and then in European myth-making. But the point I want to make, and also he makes, is that in this process, there are fixed points that are regarded as true by all concerned. Fixed points that are regarded as not invented, but actually having existed. And those are then combined with other points which are invented as the situation requires. That is to say, as someone said in Foxall and Urali said in the preface of a book on intentional history and what it can do for you, there can be no intentional history, that is the creation of a past that never was, without unintentional history. That is something that actually is regarded as true, factual truth, by the community that is interested in this. So I would see in the creation of this tradition a kind of forge, so to speak, in which truths and other myths are combined to create the identity of a particular group. So I'll put that out there. As to when, that is a difficult point, because beyond Homer, all we have is the archaeology and not much else. Of course, since we do have Minos in Homer, characterized as the double face that he is. Beyond that, images of, and now I can have the last 4 slides if you don't mind, Sarah. Images, yeah, thank you. Images of Theseus' enterprise begin to appear in the early 7th century. Here you have, and these are not Athenian vases. This is Stamnos from Megara Iblea, dated around 660 BC. The earliest ones are actually Cycladic, are actually island jars decorated in relief, and at least 2 of those show the Theseus with the children in the facing the Minotaur. So this seems to project the possible date at which this myth that includes the enterprise of Theseus circulates as a shape, as 8th century or before. Could have the next one. But the most important, but to me the most important indication has to do with something that the excavations of Cincinnati excavation directed by Jack Caskey turned up in 1963 in a structure that Caskey identified as a sanctuary or a temple. In a particular room that remained in use for a long time, there was found a cache of clay statues, fragmentary clay statues. Could have the next one. And this is one that has been the most complete one, let's say, which are completely Minoan in character. That is, women, probably dancers, with this bell-shaped shirt and the tight corset that leaves the breasts exposed and a braid down the back. These are very Minoan in look. And they're produced in the 17th and 16th century. And possibly all the way down into the 13th century, but that is unclear. It is unclear whether the cult was continued in the sanctuary at Aia Irini on Chaos, but if I could have the next slide. But what we do know is that in the 8th century, over the room in which this deposit was found, was laid a pavement of flat stones, and above it a rough, rocky superstructure. And the head of one of these statues was set up, was displayed in this clay ring, in what is a clear instance of reuse. Reuse is a nice term, doesn't tell you very much. A nice recent study of these statues and this deposit by Gorgiani interprets this as an instance of a renewed interest in ancestors, in the Bronze Age ancestors at the beginning of the Iron Age. I would rather consider this an instance of spolia, that is the reuse of an ancient monument in a new context, much like Trajanic release on the Arch of Constantine in Rome. And by displaying these ancient reliefs on a new monument that is dedicated by a new emperor, what Constantine does is, in a sense, lay claim to the past, to the glorious past, to the Trajanic era. So I would see this, as modest as it is, as a laying claim to the Minoanized past on the part of the Cairns. So if I were to try to eyeball a time at which the story of Minos took shape, or a first shape, because obviously it was modified through the centuries, I would aim for the 10th to 8th century. So here I am. Questions? I'm sure none.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I did see one question going by.
Was it clear or was it muddy? Because it's quite a difficult.
I thought that it was clear.
Yes.
The question that I saw is the legacy of Minos then, so to speak, the other that defines the Ionian identity?
Minos remains important because with him goes the domain of the Aegean Sea. And so the Ionian identity, at least at an early point, because Ionian identity becomes very muddied once the Athenians intervene with the Ionian, so-called Ionian migration. It gives them a definition as an ethnic group that locates their origin at the origin of the state and the domination of the Aegean.
Mm-hmm. So maybe an other that is incorporated in a way. Be able to elaborate on your question.
Yeah, I've found that epithet for Minos, Olophronos, or Olophron,
Yes.
interesting in the Lexicon Americum of Apollonius Sophista. He mentions that, you know, that meaning of designing baleful things, and adds it also means thinking healthy things. I don't know whether the idea was that it comes from holos, you know, complete, you know. So, but there is the destructive or the malignant, as it's translated by some, and also the completing it all. Atlas is described as Olaophron as well, who knew the depths and the heights and held the world and the heavens apart. So I like your interpretation of Minos's Olaophron very much, including it all and not you know, separating, well, is it the one or is it the other? But, you know, it's all the same Minos. Anyway, I appreciate your brilliant presentation.
It's not my, almost everyone, generally, one takes Olophron to mean bent on destruction or
yeah. Oh, I'm Jack Vaughn, and I frequently represent the Minority Report.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Thanks, Jack.
Thanks.
I'm getting worried here. I hear no objections.
Oh, we have a question. I saw Georgia, your hand was up.
Thank you very much. This wonderful approach. I have a question regarding the overlapping and in times contradicting accounts between the two historians we know, Thucydides and Herodot, on the Carians. When one, they're his enemies, and the other, they're his friends. And I would like to add to that, how do you, let's say, explain this? I would like to, I'm very grateful if I heard your point of view on that. And I would like to add to that, that Herodot, for his own reasons, when he describes or he reports on Polycrates' role of Samos, he mentions Minos as the first thalassocrat. But we shouldn't be bothering now with him because he doesn't belong to the Anthropiogenos. And could you please elaborate on that? Why is Minos?
Yeah, it's.
Thank you very much.
Herodotus out because you know, it does complicate things a little bit. But here it is. Yes, Herodotus in book 3.
I'm sorry for complicating things. I just
no, it's a good complications. The complications that, you know, helps. Herodotus in book 3 says Polycrates was the first to have mastery of the sea. So Knos and Minos, if indeed there was a Minos. So here but of men, of real men, of what is called the human race, Polycrates was the first, because he wanted to rule Ionia and the islands. So here is something that has puzzled historians quite a bit, in that Herodotus seems to be the kind of historian at this point that Thucydides, we think, is so questioning the sources and so forth. So Polycrates is really the first, but the Minos, who knows if there was a Minos. But before this, he does mention Minos, Herodotus, in book 171.3. And says, because Minos had conquered all this land and he was successful in war, he conquered the Cyclades. But the Cyclades in Herodotus are populated by Carians. And so the Carians were the most renowned race at this time. So while in Thucydides and the other legends that I've put forward about Minos, what we have is a purification of the islands of Carians. The Carians are chased off and replaced by this population of Cretans. In Herodotus, we have Carians manning the Minos' ship, and there is no question that there was a Minos. So Herodotus is sort of playing it both ways here. And I think, again, this is one of those, I venture in treacherous territory, but this is part and parcel of Herodotus' scorn of the Ionians. That is to say, and Herodotus himself was Carian. So the people who manned Minos' ships were Carians, and for that reason they were renowned. So there was glory attached to being subject to Minos. But he denies Minos as a first man.
Yeah, but this is, excuse me, it's exactly that, because by doing that, in a way, he challenges any attempts to create or restitute or establish, let's say, what you previously said. In a way, he kind of puts the whole thing under not on doubt, but he questions, the heritage version.
Yes.
And this is the important side of it. Thank you very much.
And Herodotus is notoriously hostile to Ionians. He says they call themselves Ionians, but in fact they're all, a bunch of people mixed together, Abantus and Clazomenians and so forth, and they speak 4 different languages. So he really challenges the very notion of Ionianness, so to speak. Yeah, I couldn't really go into that because I thought the road was tortuous enough. So,
if I may ask another question.
Yes.
I read the Archaeology of Thucydides with Jim Wiseman about 53 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And we talked about that passage of the cleansing of Delos, and how even today the Carians vary in the manner in which they found the people buried on Delos when they were cleansing the island. And at that time, Jim thought that well, he kind of threw it out to us. I don't know if he thought this or he was just testing us. That they were buried in fetal position. And we've seen tombs in Messini where the dead were buried in fetal position. And I was wondering if you could update us on what the Carian method of burial that Thucydides might have been referring to there in book 1.
No, I don't have any wisdom on that. I think that the point was that the armor, the arms that they had revealed them to be Carians once they.
That would be the a very telling thing. Thank you so much.
Not at all. At all.
Maria, I saw that you had a question before.
Hi.
I think it was Masha, and then I can ask after
Oops.
Masha.
I'm sorry. The two of you are next to each other in my little arrangement of windows. Masha, go ahead.
Sorry.
Hi.
Sorry, can you hear me? I had my microphone mute, right?
Yes, yes.
Thank you so much for this wonderful thesis and sort of bringing all sorts of strands together that you mentioned. I mean, I know Greg has been interested in parts of what I see as a much bigger theory behind your specific argument, and I've always been very intrigued by the possibilities. If I can just ask you maybe to clarify something that you said in the response to the first question about the Athenian intervention or the Athenian appropriation of these myths. Do you see them then as you mentioned this key period between 10th and 7th century? Do you see this just as another wave, another specific, I don't know if appropriation is the right word, but sort of, as you were talking about, owning and displaying the spolia. In that sense, I mean, incorporating previous stories in their own history. Do you see any difference, or is that just, do they come at the end, or maybe not the end of a long wave? And as I think Keith mentioned, also not necessarily denying other places their inheritance to Crete, but just sort of doing it their own way. If you could just tell me your thoughts on that.
I'm not sure I heard all the question, but what you're talking about is the fact that I'm trying to localize the emergence of this tradition at some point between the 10th and the 8th century, and the end of the 8th century, let's say, which is when I think becomes visible somewhat in the archaeological record with representations of the deed of Theseus, and then with the statues at Kea, with this reuse of the head of the statue. We don't have any other sources. It's really very difficult. My impression, I can sort of speak about my impression. We are even a long way from Solon's famous quip that Athens is the most ancient city of Ionia. But I think that if the story had a coherence in the way we have it, it incorporates Minos, first man, first legislator, conqueror of the islands, and man who in the end meets his end, and the legacy of Minos goes to Athens, belongs to Theseus. So it's complete this way. So it has to be something that comes into being at a time when Athens could claim dominion over the islands. But we know very little about this period. I mean, that's what I think might have happened, but it's really out there. I don't have a good answer.
No.
So.
No, this is perfect. Actually, I just wanted to make sure that I understood at least the trajectory, even if we cannot uncover every.
Right. I'm really interested. I mean, I got interested in this because of my fresco, because I think it is in a process such as this, in which you put together things that you know and things that are new and adapted, new stories. That's when I think traditions can percolate. That is a mechanism by which you pick and choose what it is that is important to remember, which everybody knows. And I think the legend of the fresco might have been one of them.
Thank you for that.
Oh, nice to see you.
Other questions? Oh, yes, Maria. Oh, Yeah, you're still muted. Let me see if I can.
This is a pattern that repeats itself, say, with the Romans and the Etruscans. You know, they are the Samnites. You know, they fight and then they become one.
Mhm.
The Cretan and Athenian competition and resolution. That's brilliant. It's what a joy. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Professor.
Maria.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Pinney, for this wonderful and very thought-provoking presentation. My question is more general and perhaps in a way open-ended. Whenever I read the archaeology, especially these two, the two proemia, as we call them, and especially this your focus passage on Minos. Well, I can't help thinking whether this the way Thucydides presents Minos in a way sets a standard to his later preoccupation with Athenian thalassocracy and the Athenian arche, what became to known as arche in the 4th century BC. So in that way, he uses Minos in order to create a precedent, because I couldn't help noticing this this wonderful passage that you mentioned, 1:4, that Minos gar palaitatos ektesato kai tes nun Hellenikes thalasses. So now what we know as the Aegean Sea in Thucydides' age is now called Hellenic or Greek Sea. So do you think that there are any dynamics that Thucydides uses, as you well put it, the myth or this story of Minos, in order to manipulate it and in order to set this precedent for Athenian thalassocracy? Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, it's yes. Two things. I mean, I think that Thucydides in the Archaeology singles out two great historical events in a sense. One is the Empire of Minos, and the other one is the War at Troy. So, to my mind, this means that in Thucydides' appraisal, the Empire of Minos was just as historical as the War at Troy, or not historical as the War at Troy. But in fact, Minos is, the thalassocracy of Minos is regarded generally as the model for what will become the Delian League and the domination, the Athenian domination of the Aegean. And there is even a very good article some years ago by Elizabeth Irwin who asks, why would Thucydides adopt this character, Minos, as a model for the Athenian thalassocracy when he is such a bad character? He's such a violent, hubristic tyrant. Well, he's not only that, but he is also a first man. And so he is the paradigm to which you make reference with regard to Athenian power. And also, there is the fact that, in a sense, this dynastic link, mythological dynastic link between Minos and his successors works also for Athens. Because, of course, Theseus will ask for the hand of the bride, Phaedra, from her brothers. And the son of Theseus, King Demophon, will be the grandson of Minos. So there is a mythical dynastic link that also involves Athens. it's just the fact that then things get very muddied when Athens claims to be the point of origin of Ionianism. And that's a completely other story. I don't know if that answered your question, but yeah. Good.
You did. Thank you very much.
Well, our hour is about up. So I would just like to thank you again, Gloria, for that wonderful talk.
Well, thank you. This was fun. This was, and you were all very nice.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thanks you all. Until next time.